There's only been one time I've retweeted uncritically Nicola Sturgeon, the outgoing First Minister of Scotland. But even then, there were sirens going off in the back of my mind. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of About Abortion. Thank you for joining us. Please do remember to like and share and comment and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. That just helps us to get these vital, life-saving messages out to more people. And in particular, can you share this with your church leaders, others in your church, if you're in a church that's not currently teaching about abortion? Today we're talking about Nicola Sturgeon doing the splits. It's not every day that I praise something Nicola Sturgeon says. In fact, I think it's possibly only happened once, but there was an occasion recently where I think she got it just right, or at least almost just right. So what's the story? On Twitter, this is 2 or 3 weeks ago, at time of recording, Nicola Sturgeon, and this is one of her sort of parting acts as she was on her way out, talked about a memorial book that Scotland is launching for those who've lost babies through miscarriage. So you can go on Twitter and see her comments on this and what it refers to. And it was retweeted by the incoming First Minister as well. Let me just highlight it for your attention. And a lot of newspapers pick this up as well. So the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has announced a memorial book for those who have experienced a pregnancy or baby loss prior to 24 weeks. And this will launch this summer. A commemorative certificate recognising the loss will also be available. And here's her quote: "I've spoken in the past about my personal experience of miscarriage, and I know the sense of grief will stay with me and my husband forever. I also know that we would have drawn comfort at that time if there had been a way for us to mark the loss and formally recognise the child we were grieving." And then sort of off her own personal account, as were, Nicola Sturgeon then retweeted that saying, "This is the right thing to do and means a lot to me personally. For anyone experiencing miscarriage, the grief is real. And for many, there will be comfort in being able to recognise the loss of the child you hoped your pregnancy would become. Thanks to those who made it possible." So that's the basic story. So this is happening in Scotland. I know there are efforts to get a similar thing going in England, but to my understanding, it's not as advanced, that campaign here in England and Wales. What you do have is for any baby born stillborn or dies in any way after 24 weeks, there is recognition. It's counted as a stillbirth rather than a miscarriage. There's a certificate and so on. But the issue here is prior to 24 weeks, up until now, right across the UK, there's just no recognition really at all of that. And so that's the change that's taking place here. And a flurry of newspapers picked up on this story including English newspapers. Also Cosmopolitan was all over this, and linking to a wider issue. Really, what the context that this rests in, which is miscarriage, is one of those taboo subjects, it seems, that we're just not talking about enough. And it's fantastic that people are seeking to break the silence on this, to recognise the humanity of the child that's been lost through miscarriage or stillbirth. To acknowledge their humanity, to therefore validate the intense grief that can be experienced, and then to really help those who are grieving. Linked to the Cosmopolitan news story on this, it was another Cosmopolitan article, which I'll put links to here, but it says it's called "The Best and Worst Things to Say After a Miscarriage or Stillbirth." And it lists things that you really shouldn't say if you're seeking to be of comfort. And it's really interesting as you read through this list of things not to say. Things like, well, at least it was early. Okay, this is a series of testimonies from mothers who've lost babies through miscarriage. Things that you shouldn't say, well, at least it was early. Or another one was objecting to the dehumanizing language used of her child. So I think it was a few weeks after her miscarriage, there was still some bleeding going on. And someone said, we still got some products of conception in there. And she said, well, hang on, that's my child, not just products of conception. So there's a very firm rejection of dehumanizing language, of trivializing the humanity and life of the unborn child, and therefore trivializing the loss and the grief. And this is a fantastic thing. It's great to see people rejecting dehumanizing language. It's great to see people acknowledging the humanity of the child in the womb, even at a kind of an almost legislative level. It's not going to be compulsory for people to register, as it were, the life and death of their child, but it's something they can do, and they can get a certificate, and that's all free of charge in Scotland from this summer onwards. And that is really good. And the reason I sort of retweeted this uncritically, almost, was that I think that is a very, very good thing. We have lost a child through miscarriage, and some no doubt well-meaning people said some things to us that really hurt. People saying, "Oh, are you going to try again?" Or, as if you just, you were trying to do the long jump and you didn't quite get 5 meters 95 this time, so you're going to try again. As if it's a sort of a failed project rather than a child you've just lost. Or someone saying, does your wife feel better? About a day or two after you've just lost a child. Is she feeling better now, sort of thing. And so, I absolutely welcome this change. It's fantastic to see unborn children recognised and rehumanised, as it were. This is brilliant, and I have to say, from anything I've seen come out of Nicola Sturgeon's mouth, probably, in my view, the best thing to have come out. But, of course, there was always a but coming. The reason it's only almost total agreement, and the reason sirens were going off at the back of my head as I was retweeting uncritically, is that this same Nicola Sturgeon will support, through legislation, the intentional killing of those very same human beings in the womb. That which she wants to call a baby, a child, something to be cherished, a loss to be grieved. In one breath, in the next breath, she is a campaigner for killing more of them and for keeping away those who would offer information, prayer, support that could save some of their lives, peaceful demonstrations. Let me give you some examples. Nicola Sturgeon is clearly a supporter of so-called buffer zones right across Scotland. So these are zones where it's illegal, it becomes a criminal offence to peacefully offer prayer, support, information. And I've said this a million times, I'll say it again for the record. Harassment, intimidation, and so on are already illegal and have been for a long time. Those things are not happening outside clinics. If they had been happening, there would already have been arrests, because pro-lifers are being watched like hawks. And if they'd put a foot wrong, there's absolutely no doubt the police would have been all over them in seconds. So there never has been any offence outside an abortion clinic. What there has been is prayer, support, information, and that has led to many women changing their minds, and their babies are alive today as a result. But Nicola Sturgeon doesn't like that. She has worked to introduce buffer zones right across Scotland. She also attended a self-declared abortion summit. Now let's just break that down for a second. What is abortion? Abortion is the intentional killing of an innocent human being in the womb. In our cultural context today, political context, we're talking about mass killing of innocent human beings in the womb. So what is an abortion summit? An abortion summit is looking at how we can increase the genocide. It's a genocide summit. This is, instead of the sort of Nuremberg trials, which Perhaps one day there will be an equivalent with today's baby genocide, that some people will have to be held to account for what's been going on. That's another discussion. But this is actually a summit, a conference, an international-ish gathering to advance the genocide. And Nicola Sturgeon was at that summit lending her support. She also introduced conversations a few years back as to how Scotland could take in women from Northern Ireland, pregnant mothers from Northern Ireland, where abortion was illegal at the time, and kill their babies in Scotland. She was opening up talks to see how that could happen, which not only is that incredibly bloodthirsty to try and kill babies, not only in your own land, but get babies transported across the sea from other lands to have them killed in your own land. But interestingly, it also flies in the face of devolution, which Nicola Sturgeon would like us all to believe she's a huge advocate for. Just a few examples of her avid support for the killing of babies in the womb. And interestingly, to name but one media outlet, the Cosmopolitan newspaper I mentioned to you also supports abortion. Since the fall of Roe v. Wade, for example, a string of stories, including one, I'll put the link again here, that speaks about having an abortion in the back of a kind of moving abortion clinic. That this is from those who cry foul at the idea of abortion being made illegal because it's then back to the back streets. Apparently, well, this media outlet is glorifying illegal abortion, talking about a mobile abortion clinic, a van that's literally performing abortions inside it whilst driving around a freeway in America. And it opens with a really distasteful description of, okay, so here you are, you're going for an abortion, you're 7 weeks pregnant, you know it's going to be vacuum aspiration, it'll only take 5 minutes, you'll be right as rain in no time, but where is it going to take place? Well, you don't know, because you're in a van and the van is moving. And the jolly tone really jars when you know what vacuum aspiration actually is. This is a form of abortion, surgical abortion, where a sort of tube is inserted into the womb and is attached to a suction device. This suction device is several times more powerful than a domestic Hoover, and it sucks this living human being out of the womb and alive, and in the process churns it up. Okay, this is a gruesome act of violence. In the very same newspaper, the same media outlet that just a moment ago was talking about how important it is to recognize the humanity of the unborn child lost through miscarriage, and how awful and insensitive and dehumanizing it is to speak about the unborn as just products of conception. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening in on our podcast today. Hope you're appreciating what we're doing here. And if you are, can I just ask a little bit of help from you as we try and get these vital, life-saving messages to more people? If you can like these videos, it really helps just to boost their visibility. More people will come across them. Likewise, if you comment and, of course, share this video with friends, family on social media, it just helps to get the message out there to more people. One more thing. We're so delighted that these messages are going out free of charge to anyone who wants to listen to them. They're free of charge for the listener. They're not free for us to produce. In fact, it costs some £300 or so per month to get these made. Can you help us cover the costs of this? Many of us will have a subscription to Amazon Prime or BritBox or Netflix or whatever. If just 40 people supported us to the tune of £7 or £8 a month, that would cover our costs and enable us to keep going and getting these messages out there. This is the only regular podcast on abortion in the UK. What we're doing is so important. Please help us to do this. Could you be one of those 40 people just to make a subscription, as it were, of £7 or £8 a month? Be so grateful if you could. Go to the link below, Brephos.org/donate. Okay, well, I'll let you get back to the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. God bless. So what's going on here? We've got this unbearable cognitive dissonance. We've got, on the one hand, Nicola Sturgeon, Cosmopolitan, even The Independent and The Guardian, and various media outlets championing, it would seem, the humanity, the dignity of the unborn child in the womb when they're lost through miscarriage. But then those same outlets and same people will be advocates for intentionally killing those same innocent human beings. It reminds one of Stella Creasy, Member of Parliament for Walthamstow, Labour MP, who has spoken very candidly about the loss through miscarriage that she's experienced, and has campaigned for more recognition. She talked about how her own unborn child was at a stage where she could hear music in the womb, talking about prenatal development in quite some detail, and yet she is an avid supporter of the killing of babies. She championed the advance of the genocide into Northern Ireland, went over to Northern Ireland to have special talks to try and bring the genocide over there. So what's going on here? How do we account for this cognitive dissonance? How can one person say two things that are so contradictory, even campaign for things that are so contradictory? Nicola Sturgeon here is doing the splits. She's doing the ideological splits. She's got one foot on the sort of, let's rehumanize the unborn child, dignify them, acknowledge their humanity, give certificates to acknowledge what a big deal it is when you lose a child in the womb. And on the other platform, where her other foot is, it's all about ignoring the humanity of the unborn child and just destroying them and pretending they were never there. And even within the tweet that I shared with you, the cracks are already beginning to show. Did you notice how Sturgeon's sort of trying to have it both ways? She said, we need to recognize the loss of the child you hoped your pregnancy would become. Or the First Minister's account said, any who have experienced a pregnancy or baby loss prior to 24 weeks. And the wording on the government website is similar. So it's pregnancy or baby. So, let's just leave both options there. So yes, if for you it's a child, then it's a child. But if for you it was just a pregnancy, it's a pregnancy. But we don't want to assume what it was for you. Trying to have it both ways. And this scales up to full-blown campaigning for both of those extremes. The language wasn't lost on some of those who responded to her tweet. One person said, look at how you've had to word that. You couldn't say lost the child. You had to say lost the child you hoped your pregnancy would become. So it wasn't lost on everyone who saw this, that she's trying to hedge it. She's trying to have it both ways, even within this tweet that's designed to rehumanize the unborn child. She's trying to leave space for that kind of pro-abortion stream as well. So how do we account for this unbearable cognitive dissonance? How can it be? What explains this? Is there a unifying principle that explains how miscarriage support and abortion support can exist in the same person? Well, it turns out there is. You see, Sturgeon is right on miscarriage, sort of. She's right in the way that a broken clock is correct twice every 24 hours. She's sort of right, but she's sort of not. Because what she's saying is right, but it's not grounded in objective truth. So it only sort of happens to be right. In Romans chapter 1, we see some biblical light shed on what's going on here. Let me just read a few words from Romans chapter 1. Starting at verse 18, the wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness. Since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. And then later on, for although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thinking became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity, for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. And then later on, furthermore, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, he gave them over to a depraved mind, to do what ought not to be done. And later on, although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they do not only continue to do those very things, but also approve of those who practice them. They invent ways of doing evil. This is the mindset that we're seeing played out before our eyes, being given over to a depraved, foolish, futile mind. This cognitive dissonance springs from a kind of subjective relativism. It's not submitted to objective truth, much less is it submitted to the authority of our Creator God and his laws and his word. What explains how one person can have these two different things is they're unhinged from reality. It's not about objective reality. It's about my reality. It's about what I want or what I think. You know, the well-known mantra, "My body, my choice." Really, it's kind of the other way around. It's my choice, and therefore my reality. It's unhinged from reality because it's not about what's true, what's objective. It's about what I want. It's not just choosing my own morality, it's choosing my own reality. It's about what's real for me. So it's my choice. So it's my choice. If it's my choice that it's just my body, there's no baby in there, then that's what I've decided. But if it's my choice there is a baby, then there is a baby, because that's what I've decided. It's a kind of tailor-made, constantly shifting reality of our own making. It's an illusion, of course. There is no reality of our own making. It's unhinged from reality because it's tethered to this unbridled will and desire. This is the sovereign self. This is what it looks like when people worship themselves rather than their Creator. And innocent babies get killed in the crossfire of this ideology. We're so used to it. We're so used to this idol of choice, of autonomy, of self. We've grown so accustomed to it. It's like a wild animal that's come into our homes, and we just get used to living alongside them in spite of their violence. Occasionally, what they do or say may kind of make sense, just as a broken clock happens to be right sometimes. But in fact, it's lethal. It devours and it kills. This is where the cognitive dissonance comes from. If I want it to be a baby, it's a baby. If I don't want it to be a baby, it's not a baby. And not only that, I decide my own reality, and you will have to agree with me. So I need you to affirm my reality. If I say it's a baby, you all need to affirm that. But if I say it's not a baby, you dare not tell me it's a baby. And in that regard, it's much like the trans movement. You need to affirm what I say is reality, or else. So the pro-abortion, the pro-baby genocide movement isn't just anti-life and pro-death. It's anti-truth. It's anti-reality. We found this on the streets just the other day. We had our public education display in Norwich, and we lifted up our banner showing the reality visually of abortion, and within seconds it was covered by protesters, pro-abortion protesters, and they obscured this banner for the entire display from the public's view with their coats, just by standing in front of it. And the fact the police did nothing about this is another story we may explore another day. But the point is, we find this all over the world, wherever we do our work, be it in America, Ireland, here, Europe, Isle of Man, wherever this kind of work takes place. advocates for abortion respond in exactly the same way. They don't debate us. They don't present a counter narrative. They don't show facts that dispute our facts. They don't present arguments that dispute our arguments. They just want to cover it up. They just want to cover up the reality of abortion. They support abortion, but they don't want you to see abortion. They're happy to tolerate the practice of abortion. Here in Norwich, more than 3 babies are killed every day. They're comfortable with that happening. They're not comfortable with you seeing that. Why? Because this whole ideology is anti-truth. It's anti-reality. It hates the facts. And of course, when abortion is seen for what it is, it protests itself. We don't have to protest abortion. We don't protest abortion. We educate, we expose it, and it protests itself. And advocates for abortion understand that, and they hate it. And that's why they seek to cover it up. That's why they won't debate us. It's very difficult to get anyone to step up and have a debate about abortion. Instead, they want to cover it up. They want to suppress the debate. They're on the run. They're on the retreat, abortion advocates, really. You look at what's going on in the public square. They won't talk about it. They'll very frequently get angry. They'll very quickly resort to ad hominems, attacking the person they're meant to be debating, saying that because they're a man or because they've never had children or because they're not this or not that, they don't have a right to speak on this. They'll say they'll change the subject to where our funding is supposed to have come from. I mean, it's really lame, the quality of debate that you get, if you ever get it, on this issue. Why? Because it's this whole worldview and this particular sort of offspring of this worldview, the pro-abortion agenda, is not springing out of a consideration of the facts. It's not springing out of objective truth. It's springing out of this idol of the self. And it's an idol that hates reality and truth because it can't handle reality and truth. Because if reality is at odds with what I want, then I will love a delusion instead. So this is the insanity and the barbarity of the sovereign self. I decide, and you will have to agree with me, even when I contradict myself. So this idol of our day, the idol of choice, autonomy, self, my body, my choice, it's a circular argument that begins with me and it ends with me. It's interesting in the Twitter feed after Nicola Sturgeon on the thread, after she put her kind of initial comment and people chimed in to show their support or otherwise. When this one person said, well, look at how you've had to word that. Couldn't you just say, loss of the child? Why do you have to say the child you hoped your pregnancy would become? There was a real pile on this guy of people saying, oh, how many miscarriages have you had? Who are you to speak? You're not a woman, and so on. And again, it's this anti-truth agenda, which is seeking to silence and deplatform people, not according to what they're saying, the veracity of the claim, but according to who they are. Who are you? You don't have a truth here because you haven't got an experience of this. If this is Nicola's truth, well, she's been there. Therefore, what she's saying is valid. And again, it's an ideology. That's a line of thinking that is viciously opposed to truth, and is deathly. The good news is that this ideology is so self-contradicting and so obviously self-contradicting because it's so unhinged from reality. Its days are surely numbered. I've noticed that contradiction or hypocrisy, it's one of those things that even the unregenerate mind can be quite sensitive to and can pick up on quite easily. We've seen that again with the trans debate. A lot of non-Christian people have been saying, well, hang on, can you really say black is white and white is black? I mean, let's just look at the biology here. So there's encouragement to be drawn when we see this ideology for what it is, the insanity of it. It is contradicting itself to a degree that can be pointed out, and even the unregenerate mind can perceive, because what we've got here is 7 billion different little religions. Secular humanism is not neutral. It's not morally sort of beige. There is no spiritual neutrality. There's no moral neutrality. Secular humanism represents 7 billion little gods, each individual one of us, doing their own thing. That's 7 billion different realities, 7 billion different moralities. And it's no wonder that someone like Nicola Sturgeon, who subscribes to this, generally speaking, finds herself doing the splits ideologically. But the good news is that this ideology cannot stand. And just as with every idol, it is useless. It is found wanting. Scriptures tell us that idols are made of wood and stone, and metal. They can't hear you. They can't speak. They can't do anything for you. And the same is true of the idol of our day, the idol of self. It promises a lot, but it delivers nothing. And here, its insanity is really beginning to show. This is Sturgeon's message. Every child in the womb deserves recognition unless we decide to kill them instead. These are the words of a chilling tyrant. Not only is it evil, it's also insane and it's unsustainable. Secular humanism is already beginning to devour itself. We're seeing that with the trans and the TERF debate. There's already fighting in the camp internally as people who, on the one hand, want to unmoor from a Christian worldview and objective reality and natural norms. Unsurprisingly, they are finding themselves bumping into a whole world of problems because, of course, they all want to draw lines somewhere, maybe not where they were once drawn, but they're still going to draw lines because no one would actually suggest that literally every single thing you could ever do is permissible. Everyone's got a line they draw. And of course, what are you drawing those lines according to? What's your standard? What's your authority? And so it's kind of turning into guerrilla warfare out there as people are trying to redefine things constantly in a way that's unhinged from reality and not submitted to the authority of our Creator. But not only is the ideology sort of devouring itself, secular humanists are devouring one another. They're turning on each other. Those who subscribe to a godless, sort of self-centered morality, a sort of a way of constructing mores which starts with what I want and what I feel. It's not working, and they're very quick to turn on one another. The sort of wokerati cannibals. Cancel culture takes no prisoners, and I'm sure we can all think of examples of where someone who was right on for a long time but said one wrong thing, didn't use the latest terminology, said something a few years ago that was dug up against them, and it's capital punishment every time in this kind of cancel culture. There are no second chances. There's no grace. It takes no prisoners. It's death for everyone who steps out of line. And so what we're also seeing is that people are nervous about jumping onto these bandwagons because they intuit that, it could be me next. What if they turn on me? What if I step off this rapidly narrowing line and I say the wrong thing? Maybe these aren't the guys I want to be getting too close to. I maybe shouldn't be putting all my eggs in this basket. So not only is the ideology devouring itself, those who subscribe to it are beginning to fight one another and devour each other, sort of cannibalistic culture. The thing, of course, about cannibals is no matter how friendly they might appear to begin with, you never quite know where you stand with them. They might invite you round for dinner, but you're not ever so sure what it is they have in mind. So I think we can take heart from this cognitive dissonance, actually, this unbearable tension, this insanity, because actually a kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. And I think the unmissable sort of contradiction here, that you can on the one hand campaign for the dignity and humanity of unborn children to be recognized and at the same time campaign for them to be killed in ever greater numbers. That insanity, it just can't last. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And for those listening in, perhaps there are some listening in who aren't sure where they stand on all this. I want to encourage you to see just what a sinking ship secular humanism is. It's not based on reality. It's certainly not neutral, but it's a sinking ship. And I want to encourage you to jump off it before you go down with it. There's an old hymn, "On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand." We're seeing secular humanism sink intellectually, morally, socially. It's failing. And Nicola Sturgeon's rapid demise is just one example of that. And I'm sorry to say that I think we're going to see more of that going on in Scotland unless there's a dramatic turnaround very soon. So this is why I was happy to retweet uncritically, more or less, Sturgeon's message about recognizing baby loss. I'm keen to heighten this unsustainable tension. I want to draw attention to the glaring self-contradiction of Sturgeon, of Stella Creasy, of these various media outlets, and of our society. On the one hand, we're trying to acknowledge miscarriage grief all the more, which is fantastic, but at the same time, the abortion rate's going up and up. So which is it? Which is it, United Kingdom? Which way are we going to go? Because you can't go both ways. You can't do the splits forever. So what? As these things move further and further apart, which are we going to choose? Because you can't have it both ways. So that's why I was happy to retweet uncritically. We need to be, as Martin Luther King said, going for modulated conflict. We want to actually expose and bring tension to the surface. So it's all to the good if we can highlight a contradiction like this and make people feel uncomfortable with the sorts of things that are being said. But it's also just in and of itself a very good idea. Babies lost through miscarriage are worthy of recognition and of being grieved, just as babies in line for abortion are worthy of protection from that act of violence designed to take their life.